Well, Sunny Bonani, greetings in the name of Jesus. Lake Malami, New Carolyn. I'm one of the pastors here. And that is the typical greeting that is given in every church in Swaziland, Africa, otherwise known as Eswatini. We just got back 2 days ago, and this morning and throughout the weekend, we are sharing not only stories of dinners with Jesus, but we will be sharing stories from Eswatini. You know, one of the most prominent dinner parties that Jesus attended was actually at a wedding in the village of Cana. He was there along with his mother and his disciples. Now, weddings in Jesus' time and in his culture were very different from weddings today. They lasted several days rather than several hours. And the hosts of the wedding were obligated to provide all of the meals and all of the wine for the entire time of the festivities. So you can imagine there would have been a little tension that was created when the wine ran out partway through. And we're going to pick up that story in John chapter 2. The next day, there was a wedding, a celebration in the village of Cana in Galilee. Jesus' mother was there, and Jesus and his disciples were also invited to the celebration. The wine supply ran out during the festivities, so Jesus' mother told him, "They have no more wine." "Dear woman, that's not our problem," Jesus replied. "My time has not yet come." But his mother told the servants, "Do whatever he tells you." Now let's pause for a moment. Why would Mary be so concerned about the hosts running out of wine? Was she friends with them? Were they relatives? Or was she just really concerned and compassionate for this family? We don't know, but what we do know is this, that the wine running out wasn't just an inconvenience at this wedding party. The wine running out was a very shameful thing for the family that was hosting. You see, they would now become the talk of the village, and not in a positive light, because they could not meet up the expected expectations of hospitality. Let's carry on, verse 6. Standing nearby were 6 stone water jars used for Jewish ceremonial washing. Each could hold 20 to 30 gallons. Jesus told the servants, "Fill the jars with water." And when the jars had been filled, he said, "Now, dip some out and take it to the master of ceremonies." So the servants followed his instructions. When the master of ceremonies tasted the water that was now wine, not knowing where it had come from, though of course the servants knew, he called the bridegroom over. "A host always serves the best wine first," he said. "Then when everyone has had a lot to drink, he brings out the less expensive wine. But you have kept the best wine until now." This miraculous sign at Cana in Galilee was the first time Jesus revealed his glory, and his disciples believed in him. You know, I've always been deeply moved by the fact that Jesus' very first miracle took place at a wedding celebration. He didn't begin his ministry by healing a blind man or calming a raging storm. He started by rescuing a family from the quiet shame of running out of wine at the wedding, and by honoring his mother's simple request. Why? Well, I believe there's a very powerful message in this, and it is this. Jesus cares about every person, and he cares about every single part of our lives. The big dramatic needs that we have, but the quiet ones too. And he delights in showing up in ways that are more generous and more personal than we could ever imagine. While visiting our care points in Eswatini, our team witnessed something truly remarkable. A simple field trip, the kind often taken for granted here, turning into a source of joy and of wonder for 276 children over 2 unforgettable days. We took the children from grades 1 and up from both care points to Milwan Game Reserve, where the kids had the opportunity to walk down trails near zebras and wildebeests and impalas and a huge pond of crocodiles. A few different times during our hike, we came so close to the zebras, we all stood in awe as these beautiful creatures crossed the path right in front of us. One memory that I will carry in my heart forever happened during the field trip with the Bulbagazi kids. I was walking with the grades 1 to 3 group, and as we hiked, a little girl that was walking beside me started singing our theme song for the week. And I was a bit surprised because we had just started singing it 2 days earlier, and here she was singing all the words from memory. I happened to have the song on my phone, so I turned it on, and the whole group started singing along. There is nothing that my God can't do, we sang. There is no mountain that he can't move. Oh, praise the name that makes a way. There's nothing that my God can't do. Surrounded by mountains and the beauty of the game reserve and animals all around us, we walked and we sang and we walked and we sang. And I felt like Maria von Trapp in The Sound of Music, taking kids down the streets of Salzburg, but here down the trails of a game reserve, singing our hearts out. But even more than that, I was deeply moved by these kids singing out the truth of God's power. Not just his power to create, not just his power to perform miracles, but his ability to take something as so ordinary as a field trip and turn it into something truly remarkable for children on the other side of the world. I stood in awe of the kindness and the generosity of God. And to top it all off, each group of kids got to experience the fun and the refreshment of a swimming pool, most for the very first time. Our team won't soon forget the smiles and the squeals of delight as kids splashed and played and moved through the water. After the hike and the swim, each child received a KFC lunch, and when they found out that KFC was being served, there were more squeals of delight. You see, in Eswatini, KFC is a very rare and a special treat, and the kids could not contain their excitement with this meal. One little girl ran up to me at the end of our time there, and she was going to the bus to return to the care point, and she wrapped her arms around me and she said, "Thank you so much for the KFC." I had seen her enjoying swimming that afternoon, but it was clear that KFC was the highlight of her day. Now, how does a simple field trip connect to the story of Jesus turning water into wine? Well, I believe it reflects the same kind of hospitality, one that goes beyond meeting basic needs to reveal the heart of a generous God who delights in his people. God's hospitality isn't just about survival. It's about joy. It's about beauty, and it is about abundance. Wine wasn't absolutely essential at the wedding in a small town 2,000 years ago. Yet Jesus spared the host the embarrassment of running out of wine, not only by providing more for their guests, but by making it even better than before. What an extravagant God. In the same way, this field trip wasn't essential for survival. But for 276 children, it became a day filled with laughter and wonder and joy, a day they won't soon forget. Through it, they experienced a glimpse of God's hospitality, His kindness, His attentiveness, and His love poured out in a way that made them feel seen and feel valued. And church, those field trips would not have happened without your Jesus-like hospitality. On our final day at the Care Points, I had a conversation with a woman named Zuzile who oversees the region where our 2 Care Points are located. And together we were reflecting on the field trips, and she said, you know, all the staff here are talking about the Riverwood team, how deeply you love these kids, and how you create meaningful experiences for them. Of all the teams that come here to Eswatini, no one else does things like this for the children. I smiled and said, we couldn't do this without our church. They made this happen. I shared how we needed to raise $11,000 to fund these field trips, and every dollar came in just 3 weekends. Her eyes widened. You raised all of that money in just 3 weekends? Yes, I said. Our church loves these kids. They love our Care Points. They believe in this mission, and they too want to reflect the kindness and the generosity of Jesus. Now, some might wonder if that amount of money was truly necessary. Couldn't it have gone towards essential items like food or clothing? And that is a fair question. But here is what we witnessed. This field trip met a different kind of need. It reminded each child that they are more than people who are in need of basic necessities. They are people who are treasured. It gave them dignity. It gave them delight and memories that will outlast the moments. Church, your $40 zebra cards that you purchased before we left didn't just buy a fun day for these children. It spoke a profound message to 276 young hearts. The message of you are seen, you are valued, and you are deeply loved. This is the power of reflecting the heart of our generous God, the one who turns water into wine, who meets both physical and emotional needs, and who uses ordinary acts of kindness to create extraordinary moments. You see, hospitality isn't just shown when you invite someone to your home. It flows through every open hand, every willing heart, and every generous act that helps someone else feel known and feel loved. And now John will come and share some more experiences from Eswatini and another dinner with Jesus.
Well, Niabonga Google Carolyn. Thank you, Grandma Carolyn, to translate. You know, 17 years ago, we began this community-to-community connection, this partnership that we have at both our Analani and Bobogaz Care Points. And over these 17 years, we've witnessed some incredible transformations. But this year, something especially powerful stood out for me. And it came in the form of 2 young, remarkable leaders. I'd like to introduce you to Nantle. Those who are close to her call her Froggy. Nantle is a 22-year-old young woman who is working towards a career in accounting. She's very caring, she's hardworking, a very bright young lady with a vibrant faith and a tender heart. And I'd like to introduce you as well to Tandeka. Those who are close to her call her TK. And TK is a 21-year-old young woman studying to be an occupational health and safety officer. She is vibrant and joyful. She's an enthusiastic young lady with a powerful faith and a compassionate heart. And this year, these young leaders joined with us and our team for these last 2 weeks that we had the privilege to serve alongside with them. We spent our week connecting with the kids together with them, praying with each other, sharing meals together. They were welcome not just as helpers for our team, but as fellow team members. They became known to each of our team by their nicknames. I watched as the younger portion of our team were connecting with them, and they became friends. They became, the keepers of the inside jokes together. And we joined with them, and they became a part of us. But here is what makes their presence so extraordinary. Tandeka and Nantle grew up at our care points. TK at Enelani and Froggy at Bobogaz. Both of them had Riverwood sponsors who over this last decade supported them, wrote letters to them, encouraged them, sent family pictures back and forth. And because of this, both of them had the opportunity at our care points to access their education, to gain mentorship and discipleship, and to find leadership opportunities that help them to develop the giftings that God had placed in them through the support of our 2 care points. And now, after graduating recently from high school, both of them were accepted into the SLA program, the Servant Leadership Academy. This is a training ground for leadership that is done by the ministry there locally in Swaziland, and they are now being trained to become leaders of the future. And get this, in about 9 months, when they graduate from that program, they will become the shepherds, the leaders of our 2 care points. The very care points that they grew up within. This is remarkable. And it reminds me, it brings to mind one of Jesus' most famous meals that he shared in John chapter 6. It was the feeding of the 5,000. A meal that Jesus shared. It wasn't really a private meal, a private dinner party that he shared, but it was actually this messy, crowded, and unexpected meal that came about because of the needs of the many around them. And yet it reveals something very profound and beautiful about how Jesus works and who he is. A large crowd had followed Jesus, if you recall the story, and they ended up on the opposite side of the Sea of Galilee, where they were on a mountainside. And the disciples were overwhelmed. They were sort of, following Jesus and trying to help with all the logistics of things going on. And here there were thousands of people gathered, and they're overwhelmed. And Jesus asks his disciples a question. Where shall we buy bread for these people to eat? And his disciples respond quickly with what their stark reality looks like. And they say to Jesus, we don't have enough. Listen to what he says in John 6:7-9. Philip answered him, it would take more than half a year's wages to buy enough bread for each one to have just one bite. Another of his disciples, Andrew, Simon Peter's brother, spoke up. Here's a boy with 5 small barley loaves and 2 small fish, but how far can that go among so many? The disciples were acutely aware that what they had seemed so incapable of meeting the need around them. They were resolved to simply disband and give up. But a boy steps forward with his small lunch, 5 barley loaves and 2 fish, barely enough to feed his own family. And you look out into the crowd and say, this is an impossible situation. But we watch as a remarkable scene unfolds as they place the little that they had into Jesus' hands. And it becomes more than enough. Jesus feeds the entire crowd until they are full. And he asks his disciples to go around and collect what remained. And they emerge with 12 baskets full of leftovers. A very pointed and symbolic image that even as they gave out what little they had, Jesus not only meets the needs of those around them, but he leaves them with even more than they started with for themselves. And here's what strikes me. This miracle began not from a place of abundance, but from a place of scarcity with faith. Everyone there thought, this is not enough. What we have is nowhere near enough to accomplish anything in this situation. And here's why I share this story with you today. It's exactly what we are seeing play out in Swaziland. In Swaziland, the challenges are enormous. The country holds a 43% unemployment rate. Think about that for a moment. 70% of children growing up in Swaziland are below the poverty line, which is already a very, very low bar. But what we learned is their greatest barrier isn't even material. It's internal. It's this deeply ingrained belief that have emerged from years of structural poverty that have ingrained a belief that what they have is not enough, that they are not enough, that the only solutions are from outside. There's a core identity that has been shaped in this country as a product of this, that the culture is unworthy and undeserving. But when we began our partnership, this community-to-community partnership, one of the things that we were so impacted by was their vision. The vision to begin to shift this core identity within the kids of our care points. And so they began to ask the kids as they grew up in the care points, hey, what's in your basket? What do you have in there? And at first, we could see this. Their eyes stayed looking down, and they answered what they felt was the obvious answer. Well, nothing. Nothing of significance. I have nothing that I can do to contribute to this need around me or even in my own life. But they kept asking, hey, look again. What's in your basket? What's in your basket? And over again, beginning to ask and sort of explore and discover what it was, nurturing over decades a shift in their belief of their core value of who God has created them to be, and that they have deposits of gifts and talents that they need to discover for themselves. And we've watched over these 17 years, in a very profound way, collectively, the eyes of those kids starting to look up, starting to discover. We've watched a literal transformation as they discover that their baskets were not empty. And it's working. When our partnership began 17 years ago, there were 4 young local Swazi staff, and the rest of the organization was made up from outsiders to lead and to develop. get this, today it is a locally run organization from the top down with 124 full-time Swazi staff. That's transformation, absolutely. To date, they've had 176 graduates, kids coming through the care points, going through the SLA, the Leadership Academy programming. They've had 176 kids graduate from this to become the leaders of the care points, to transition into actually making an impact, gaining employment in Swaziland and being the leaders of change in their country. It's profound. And at this very moment, there are 210 teens, young teens that they're seeing leadership within, that have been placed as small group leaders within their care points to begin training them to become the leaders of tomorrow. And two of them, TK and Froggy, are now preparing to step into that leadership at our two care points. I mean, this is full circle. This is breaking the cycle. It is profound. This is not just the feeding of hungry children. It's the raising of a generation of leaders that will lead the change for themselves in their own country. And this year, we got to witness that in a very beautiful and personal way. TK and Froggy, who grew up at our care points, being asked this question: what's in your basket? What can you discover within there that God has deposited, given you, that you can offer? Their biggest barrier, and the biggest barrier, is not the obvious obstacles of poverty or resource. It's believing that they have something to offer in the first place. And once that shifted, once they could believe in themselves, they catch a glimpse of what Jesus could do and use with what they had. We see the miracle of multiplication happening all around before our eyes, and it's beautiful. This is radical hospitality, not just feeding people, but inviting them to the table. And even more profoundly, not just offering a seat at the table, but actually giving them a chance to cook. Jesus didn't multiply bread alone. He multiplied people's belief in what was possible when they stepped forward and offered what they had. Maybe you've had a thought in your life: what I have, it's not enough. I'm not enough. I don't have anything that can contribute to the world around me right now. But Jesus doesn't ask us, do you have enough? He simply asks, what's in your basket? And if you place it in his hands, you may be surprised by the miracles he's able to do through you. We know we saw a profound picture of what God is doing in Swaziland, and we feel so honored just to be a part of that. Thank you, church, for your support. I'll throw it over to Todd.
Well, Carolyn and John, thank you for your tireless leadership. They've been at this 17 years, leading our church and leading teams. And for those of you that are fairly new to Riverwood, we partially chose Eswatini 17 years ago because it had the highest HIV/AIDS rate in the world. And even today, another stat for you is that only 12% of children in Eswatini have a mom and dad. 88% of kids do not have a mom and dad. Many don't have either a mom or dad. They have maybe a grandma. AIDS has ravished the country, and we get to be a part of bringing some care and compassion and love and restoration there. You know, in the New Testament book of Luke, there's kind of a fun story about Jesus having dinner with two guys. I mean, it doesn't start out fun, but it turns kind of fun later on. Let me tell you the story. So there's these two guys who are leaving Jerusalem, and they are heartbroken. They're walking away, and they are so distraught, and they are confused, and they are just really in a tough emotional place. You see, they were followers of Jesus, but their Jesus ended up on a cross. This was so confusing. He was supposed to be the rescuer. He was supposed to be the Messiah. He was supposed to be the one who was going to answer their deepest needs, and now he's dead. And they're not sure what's going on. And so they're walking along, they're grieving, they're moaning and complaining, and a stranger joins them. And the stranger says, "Why are you guys so down?" And they said, "Are you kidding me? Have you not heard that Jesus was crucified? We put all our hope in this guy, and now we don't know where his body is. Some say it was stolen. Some say that he's alive. We don't know what's going on, and they are in such need of hope and clarity and a breakthrough in their dilemma. And the stranger really doesn't seem to pay much attention to their hurt, but rather launches into a Bible study and begins to tell them why the Messiah needed to suffer. Well, the conversation goes on for a while, and they're walking along. They finally get to this Emmaus. They're on the road to Emmaus, and it's getting late. So the two guys invite the stranger in to spend the night. And they say, "Why don't you come on in and spend the night with us?" And we pick up the story in Luke chapter 24, verse 29, and this is what it says. It says, "So he, the stranger, went in to stay with them. When he was at the table with them, he took the bread and blessed it and broke it and gave it to them. And their eyes were opened and they recognized him." They didn't know it the whole time, but this was Jesus himself. They were all, wondering, where's Jesus, and complaining about their loss and everything. And they were walking with Jesus, but they didn't realize it until he broke the bread. It's often at a table when we are sharing a meal with somebody else that the breakthrough comes. The last couple of weeks, I had the opportunity, the enormous privilege of leading our construction team, our 10-member construction team, to build the church at Beaubecause. Many of you contributed 2 Christmases ago to raise $50,000 for this church. There was some land dispute issues that had to be worked out. We finally got clearance, and so our team went there to build this. They'd been meeting in a wood and tin shack for the last 6 years. Each day, our team would arrive on site, and we would greet our Swazi counterparts, usually about 5 or 6 men. Most of them were building this building in their worn-out flip-flops and broken tools. There were also 3 or 4 women who were hauling rocks and carrying ridiculously long and very wet lumber. They were filling wheelbarrows full of gravelly dirt, and it was a great experience. Each day we would come and we would greet them, but also we felt the awkwardness of coming on site and working with our counterparts from different cultures, with languages that we did not understand each other. And so a couple of days in, one of our teammates said, "Hey, listen, instead of us having lunch separate from everybody else," because they would sometimes serve lunch or we'd be off separate from them, they said, "Why don't we pool some money together, and why don't we buy KFC?" This message is brought to you by KFC today. So why don't we buy KFC? Because KFC really is a rare treat, and if you're out in the rural areas, it's kind of almost like a status thing. I mean, it's crazy how much they love the KFC, how special it is. And so we did that. We went and we bought KFC, and we all got into the shack of a church, and we sat around. And now the awkwardness and the tension and the discomfort was not spread out over a construction site. Now it was all jammed into a little church in a circle. And it was awkward. We were looking at each other or just eating our KFC, and it was quiet. And it was like, oh, you could kind of cut the tension. Nobody knew what to do. And so the guy who suggested that we do the KFC dinner looked over to me and said, "Why don't we go around and get everybody's name?" And so I said, "Okay, listen, here's what we're going to do. If you're Canadian or Swazi, say your name, and the rest of us will try to pronounce it." Well, that got kind of fun, because they would begin to say our Canadian names, and they would trip all over it, and then they would giggle, and we would giggle, and then we would try to say their Swazi names, and we would trip all over it. They would laugh at how we were pronouncing their names, and things began to loosen up really, really well in that moment. As we were doing this, I began to ask, well, what does your name mean? And so they began telling us the names. And so one guy, he had a Swazi name, and he said what it was. We said, well, what does that mean through an interpreter? And they said, it means too many. And we kind of looked at each other, wondering what that meant. He said, well, you see, this family had many, many boys, and then they had one more, and so they named him Too Many, as in, we've got too many boys. And the room just erupted in laughter. Another guy quite proudly said, my name means carrier of the family name. And Pastor Peter from across the room over the KFC feast bellowed out, your name means nothing. And it was sort of a tense moment. And then he said, because you haven't produced even one baby, so how are you going to carry on the family name? And everybody laughed. This one lady, Nonjabo, began to tell us about how special KFC is. She said, when you're really depressed, what you do is you go to the city and you find a wrapper of KFC and you rub it on yourself, or you find an empty bag and you bring it back to your community. And when people smell the KFC on you and they see your bag, she says, all your enemies will be in wonder of how rich and how wonderful you are because you've had KFC. And of course we laughed. We found a common language in laughter. And I got to tell you, after that, as we walked out onto the site, we had experienced a breakthrough. We walked back onto the construction site, and I marveled at the chatter. I marveled at the high fives. The laughter just continued as our relationship had experienced this remarkable breakthrough where now not only did they feel seen, but we also felt seen. You know, over the last 2 weeks here at Riverwood, back home, we've been issuing a hospitality dare. Now, let me tell you where this is coming from. 4 years ago, we all lived through something horrific, the pandemic, and it robbed so much from us. But one of the things it robbed from us was our connectivity, our hospitality. We all kind of got isolated, and we got used to being isolated. And so we are very strategically studying Jesus at meals in order to open up our hearts again and begin to exercise hospitality. Now, our hospitality dare that we've been taking on, we started small, but we're going to be working up a little bit more. But it's like working a muscle. And so we're challenging you, we're daring you to take on these little dares and do them each week as we build our way towards being a little bit more hospitable and compassionate like Jesus. And here is our third hospitality dare.
Church, you were amazing. You met last week's dare head on and single-handedly increased the coffee consumption in our city while making meaningful connections. Way to go. Here's a bit of what it looked like. Okay, this week we're cranking the dare up a notch, making it just a little bit harder. The board game challenge and the coffee invite challenge were great warm-ups, but here is this week's hospitality dare. It's called the Great Treat Drop-Off. We're daring you to go make someone's day. Drop off some cookies, muffins, chocolates, a little grocery basket, whatever you want. Get creative and get your sneaky on. Make it anonymous or sign the card, whatever feels best. Just be sure to snap a photo to prove you did it. Email the photo to hospitalitydare@riverwood.cc or post it with #hospitalitydare. It's time to bring kindness, generosity, and treats that say you are loved back into vogue. Let's go, church. We can do this.
All right, so I know a bunch of us are not into social media, and the thought of taking a picture and posting it or emailing it to us seems a little out of your character. We're daring you. We're daring you to do something strategic and intentional, to care for somebody else, to see somebody else, to make a difference in somebody else's life, and to start a movement here by all of us just kind of throwing some pictures on the screen and saying, you know what, I met the dare. It was just a little dare of dropping off something kind for somebody else. But it's a way to begin to exercise that muscle. You know, As Carolyn said, hospitality isn't just about having people over to your home. Hospitality flows when your hands are open, your heart is open, and you act with generosity in order to help somebody feel seen and loved. Hospitality literally means friendliness to strangers, encouragement and kindness and compassion to fellow sojourners, inviting somebody to the table or taking the table to them with generosity. Hospitality is seeing others, seeing the potential in others, and melting away the barriers with a breakthrough. But Jesus-like hospitality will never happen by accident. You have to determine right now that you are going to exercise your hospitality and generosity muscle this next week. So your hospitality dare is to simply do something kind, a treat, a surprise, a blessing for somebody that did not see it coming. And we'd love for you to share it with us by following those instructions, by either emailing or posting it. You know, the world we live in is a world of takers, and we want to be a community of givers. The world notices power, but Jesus, in these stories you just heard, noticed people. He made sure that people felt seen. So this week, notice somebody, see them, welcome them, bless them, because every act of hospitality is like a sneak peek into the kingdom of God. You know, our world is full of closed doors. We want to be a church and a people of open doors and open hearts. So that's the dare, that's the call, that's our learning and our lesson for this week in what it means to be hospitable. We challenge you to take on the dare. Let's take a moment to worship together.